Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Penn GSC Live webinar. The time to lead is now: what senior campus leaders need to know about the new world of college athletics. This webinar is brought to you by the Center for Professional Learning at the Penn Graduate School of Education. The Center for Professional Learning designs and delivers professional learning opportunities that support educators, leaders, policymakers, entrepreneurs, and other professionals to deepen their knowledge, build their networks, and grow their careers. My name is Zachary Herman. I'm the Executive Director of the Center for Professional Learning, and I am incredibly excited about today's conversation. We have three phenomenal panelists. First, Dr. Karen Weaver, who is an adjunct assistant professor within the Higher Education Division at the Penn Graduate School of Education, and is an expert on college sports as they intersect with higher education management, media, and policy. Next, we have Dr. Laura Perna, who is the Vice Provost for Faculty at the University of Pennsylvania, as well as the GSE Centennial Presidential Professor of Education, and is an expert in college access, affordability, and success, especially for low-income, first-generation, and non-traditional students. And finally, we have Dr. Scott Flanagan, who is a senior consultant at Academic Search and served as president at Edgewood College in Wisconsin from 2014 to 2019, following 16 years of service to the college at the cabinet level in areas including enrollment, athletics, advancement, marketing, strategic finance, and planning, and inclusion. Before we get going, if you have any questions during the conversation, please feel free to submit them via the question and answer function here on this Zoom webinar. And I'm excited to start the discussion on what senior campus leaders need to know about the new world of college athletics, especially in this particularly complex moment in time. So to begin our conversation, I'll pass it to our Vice Provost, Dr. Laura Perna.
Great. Thanks, Zachary, and thanks for the opportunity to participate today. So Karen, you've been involved with college athletics at nearly every level for more than 30 years. Why is this an important moment for those of us who care about higher education to be looking closely at college athletics?
Laura, thanks so much for that question, and welcome to both you and Scott to the webinar. I'm glad you could join us. We're at a very crucial moment in time. So much is changing in college athletics, mostly because the NCAA and its member schools have kicked the can down the road far enough that finally it's time to deal with the issues. The most prominent one is names, images, and likenesses, which will allow student athletes who are currently eligible to play college athletics to actually make money off of their name or the image of their likeness. Every other student on campus has had this ability, but we're predicting this will have profound impact on the way athletes are viewed and interacted with by fans and boosters, and it could also very well affect recruiting. We're also much more aware today of the racial and social justice issues and athlete health and wellness and mental health of athletes. So there's more of that. And of course, we're waiting for the Supreme Court ruling, which could in some ways make some of the NCAA rules a violation of antitrust. So there's a lot going on that higher ed leaders need to pay attention to right now.
Terrific, thank you. Scott, you've been a college president and you've overseen college athletics. Now you're helping colleges and universities hire and develop senior leaders. What do you believe campus leaders need to know about college athletics, and what do they need to bring to the table?
Yeah, I mean, I think in so many of these settings, situating the work and institutional mission is so important. You know, there's no one size fits all approach, and so understanding the institution and its mission and values is central. But following quickly behind that is understanding the context of the student experience. And in so many ways, athletics is such an important part of that. Now at the Division I level, you know, it's part of it in a different way. You have a relatively smaller number of participants, but a huge number of fans and interested other stakeholders. At the Division III or NAIA level, many times student athletes can account for over half of a student body. And so that context of the student experience is central, and related really quickly to that is understanding the financial model around intercollegiate athletics. And of course, I say model, but there is no one model. Right at Division I, it's going to be about TV and ticket sales and other sources of revenue. At Division III and NAI, it's going to be much more about net tuition revenue that comes from enrolling students. So understanding those pieces. And then the last one, and Dr. Weaver already touched on this, but to have your eyes open for what's coming. I mean, we don't know what's coming with certainty, but there continues to be change in some of the perennial topics, things like budgets, conference affiliations, Title IX, right? Those would have been things we would have been talking about 10 years ago, but names, images, and likenesses, or student voices around topics around social justice, or perhaps what even sport looks like. I mean, where's esports fit in all of this? I mean, these are emerging topics. So being aware of what's coming, I think, is a central part of what senior leaders need to know about intercollegiate athletics today.
Laura, I'm going to ask you a question. You just served on the Post-Secondary Value Commission funded by the Gates Foundation, a group that considered the question, what is college worth? The commission's report, which was released last month, looked deeply into how colleges deliver value, particularly to those from low-income backgrounds, women, and students of color. Athletics certainly attracts students from all three of those areas. But there is growing scholarship that indicates that some athletics participation may not benefit student athletes in terms of graduation rates and economic mobility. Why should senior leadership be more in tune to this dynamic?
Yeah, really important questions. So, we know that higher education is essential to the well-being of individual people, and it's essential to our communities, states, and nation. For example, we know that on average, students who enroll in complete college have better employment outcomes. Students who complete college average higher rates of employment, and they also on average have higher salaries. One of the important takeaways from the Post-Secondary Value Commission's report is that attention only to the average masks the variation. So some students have better outcomes and some have lower outcomes. If we really care about promoting equity, then we have to understand who's benefiting and who is not. And we have to understand how our systems and our structures and our processes are contributing to differential experiences, outcomes, and benefits. There was recent attention in the media to differences in the NCAA's approaches to softball and baseball tournaments. So this is just one example that should encourage us all to think about how our practices contribute to inequity and unequal experiences. So the Value Commission didn't consider student athletes specifically, but as you say, other data and research raise important questions about whether and how student athletes are benefiting from higher education. I think, I would argue college leaders have a responsibility to ensure that all their students, including student athletes, have the support they need to complete their degrees and transition into fulfilling employment and careers. And so, Karen, with that, would you tell us more about this new certificate program and its structure? What are the topics that you'll be covering? Oh, Karen, you're on mute.
Zachary, if you could bring up the slides, we could talk a little bit about some of the hot topics. There are 3 sessions each month over 3 months. In September, we'll be talking about the student athlete experience. And some of those will be featuring things like a clear understanding of the value proposition of intercollegiate athletics for your campus. We'll be talking about the complex role of the student athlete handbook, which is increasingly becoming a subject of litigation and much consternation between teams and also between some programs. We'll also look at, as Laura mentioned, athlete wellness and time demands. One of the greatest stresses that presidents are hearing now on campus is the mental health demands. What is the obligation for the athletics department to provide specific counseling just for their student athletes in relation to what the rest of the university is doing? Zachary, could we go to the October module, please? In October, we'll focus on systems, finance, and governance. So we'll look at how college athletics revenue systems operate at all levels. It's really important to understand where the money comes from and where the money goes. We'll look at financial aid and student athlete debt. And I think this is a really underreported phenomenon. So many of the athletes, even at Division I, are on partial scholarships or are walk-ons. Who is paying for their tuition? Who is paying for their expenses? And I don't think we fully appreciate how many student athletes go into debt just to represent our institutions at the highest of levels. Another topic we'll talk about in October is coach supervision and power differentials. For those of us that have worked at the Division I level and even in some high profile Division II and III programs, there are certain coaches that seem to have more power than others. And there are certain coaches who seem to get everything they want and other coaches who seem to get nothing they want. And as Laura mentioned, that's a system problem. That's a problem with how programs are perceived. And if a coach is getting that kind of treatment, it's possible his or her student athletes are getting that same kind of treatment. So it's important for senior leaders to understand that. Next slide, please. We'll skip November. We'll give everybody off for Thanksgiving. And in December, we'll talk about managing external forces and political influences. And most of us have that on our campuses. So in light of political posturing and also the external forces like the upcoming Supreme Court ruling, like the state legislatures that are weighing in on names, images, and likenesses, and may weigh in on more characteristics, we are very much at a time of disruption. And I think it's appropriate for institutions to reconsider exactly what their commitment is to athletics at this particular time. What can we deliver on? Not what we hope to deliver on, but what can we deliver on, and start to measure those outcomes. We also will talk deeply about boards, alumni, and politics. And the boards in the last few months have played a tremendous role in upending some of the decisions that athletics departments have made. So we'll talk about that. We'll also talk about the shadow industries of college athletics. If you've been paying attention to names, images, and likenesses at all, you've noticed there has been well over 100 companies that have just emerged to help with student athletes develop their brand, their name, image, and likeness. So there's an awful lot of other industries that have incentive to try to drive this train, and senior leaders need to be aware of that. Let me tell you a little bit about the final report. The final report to get the certificate is you do an analysis based on everything that you've learned in the program on your own institution. The consultant's report that you're producing, which normally might cost you $25,000 or $35,000 if you paid somebody outside to do it, will be produced with feedback from me, and you can take it back to your president, to your board, and get a chance to give them a perspective of what's going on in 2021. We're also going to feature real world case studies, and I'm so thrilled about the people who've agreed to be my advisory team, of which Scott Flanagan is one of them, and also my guest speakers. And here are some of the case studies we're going to look at. William and Mary decided to drop 7 sports in the fall of 2020 because the finances weren't working. They suddenly, several months later, added them back. We're going to be joined by senior leaders, Dr. Matthew Lambert and Dr. Jeremy Martin, who are going to walk us through that particular case study. Stanford dropped 11 sports last summer, also because the finances weren't working. But suddenly those 11 sports are all back again. We're going to be joined by Stanford trustee, Dr. D'Angela Burns Wallace, to walk us through that. The challenges that schools are being faced left and right with being challenged under Title IX, both on the women's sports side and on the men's sports side. We've seen decisions reversed. We're going to be joined by attorney and former Vanderbilt General Counsel, Audrey Anderson, to talk about that. The growth of athletic participation at private D3 schools, as Scott mentioned, sometimes it's 50, 60, 70% of the campus population that are athletes. So what are the recruiting, retention issues that are crucial to the tuition revenues on a college campus? We'll be joined by Scott Flanagan and also Dr. Linda Oubre, who is the president at Whittier College. We're going to be talking about managing high-profile athletes on campus, especially in the age of NIL. And I can't think of too many people better than Dr. Sue Wasilek, who is the longtime dean of students at Duke University, who had the freshman Duke basketball players living in her house, in her campus house with her. We're going to talk about the role of the University of Michigan's governing board. And Michigan has gone through a lot of campus and athletic challenges this past year. And we're going to be joined by Michigan's board chair, Denise Illich, to talk about those challenges. We're going to mention what do we do with the growing challenges around college football. We'll get excellent insight into what to do with football in small colleges from Dr. Welch Suggs, who's an associate professor of journalism at the University of Georgia, and Dr. Michael Sorrell, who's the president at Paul Quinn College an NAIA school that decided to drop football. And finally, we'll look at the rise of athlete activism, mental health, and social justice issues, and the growing impact on the entire institution. We'll be joined by Penn professor, Dr. Amalia Dash, Dr. Colin Williams, a former Penn graduate student and now curriculum director for the Ross Institute for Sports Enterprise, and Dr. Kenyon Bonner, who's the vice provost at Pittsburgh, to provide real world insights and strategies into those areas. So I'm really excited about this.
Great. Wow. So many important topics and really terrific lineup of speakers. So in the time that we have left, it'd be fun to just probe some of these issues a little bit more. So Scott, as you've mentioned, the context matters, and you know a lot about the private Division III college perspective. Many of these colleges are coming out of the pandemic facing some difficult financial challenges. Can you give us a little preview of things that you will highlight with regard to what senior leaders of these institutions should be thinking about when it comes to college athletics? You know, what are the important issues, and you know what's on your mind?
Yeah, a few things. I mean, I think, you know, we've learned that there are a lot of things that can be done remotely over the past, 15 months or so, right? Athletics, with the exception of esports, isn't one of them. So I think in some ways, though some things will continue to be enhanced by technology, those places that are committed to face-to-face, to individualized, personalized learning environments, I think athletics actually could continue. And I would suggest perhaps the arts and the sciences, some of those areas where things, can't be delivered online, can really be powerful learning and enrollment generating opportunities. So I think that's a really important opportunity looking forward to sustain enrollments. And of course, that involves looking at other sports and considering whether sports like, how does esports fit into a portfolio? And then how do we do that in looking, trying to be sure that we're keeping, diversity, equity, and inclusion at the top of the list, because we know participation is uneven across sports. Karen talked about kicking the can down the road. And I think in some ways, looking at the resources, I think is going to be an important piece, because the fixed costs of participating continue to increase. Sounds like a strange sentence, but I mean, I remember talking when I was at Edgewood, and the men's basketball coach was really excited because the shot clocks with tenths of seconds had arrived. And I remember saying, how does this enhance student learning? And how do we get one more student out of this? And of course, the answer was neither of those was true. But because that's what people saw on TV, that's what you had to do, right? The third official for sports. I mean, right? So looking at, well, are all those things needed, or are they worth it? Or at what point do you just say, you know what, we'd love to do this, but the fixed costs are too high, but I can't stay up with affording officials, or buying equipment, or the travel involved, or the non-traditional seasons. I do think more institutions are going to have to take longer looks at, can we do this, or will there be conferences that start to scale back and say we can derive the financial and educational benefits of intercollegiate athletics without all those different things that now have become the norm.
Wow, really fascinating. So another current issue, as Karen, you've mentioned, is the changing use of student athletes' names, images, and likenesses. So lots going on. There's changes coming. More is likely to continue to change. So what's the role and responsibility of senior leaders in understanding the financial and legal impact of these new opportunities for athletes?
Well, for the 5 states that are enacting this as of July 1, so what is that, 20 days from now? You're going to have a lot to think about. If your state is one of the states that has passed the law, you're going to have to know exactly what the law is and exactly how you're going to ask the student athletes to report that information, if at all. Some states will require reporting, others won't. For the other states that are scrambling right now, some of them have actually originally set it up for a 2023 start time. They've added amendments to actually move it back to 2022 or 2021. So a lot's going to happen in the next 3 weeks. This week, there was a hearing in the US Senate that seems very anxious to make some sort of broad sweeping federal legislation that could affect all 50 states in the same way. But there are several US senators who would like to have additional things piled onto that. So things like guaranteeing lifetime medical care, things like guaranteeing lifetime educational benefits. So if you recruit an athlete to come to your school, you can not only offer them a full scholarship, but you can offer to pay for law school or medical school or graduate school. You can offer to pay for internships and co-ops. These are financial decisions that senior leaders must be clued in on. And there is growing national sentiment that we haven't done as well as we should by the athletes, particularly at the highest levels. As Scott mentioned, all of this has a trickle-down effect to the other divisions. Having been a Division III athletics director, there was really no need for a Division III gym to have a 1/10 of a second shot clock. But still, we were told by the NCAA that in order to be a competitive surface, that's what we had to do. I know exactly how much it cost to install that, $4,500. I don't know where that money came from. We found it. And those are the kinds of things that we have to have in terms of value judgments about what college athletics truly means and what the experience delivers. There's a lot of change coming for sure. So Laura, for years, you played a leadership role at Penn's Graduate School of Education in the Executive Doctorate Program, an EDD program that has produced over 50 college presidents in the last 20 years. What's the value proposition for earning a credential from the #1 graduate school in the country?
Well, thanks for the question, Karen. So of course, I'm totally biased, but I believe that there is tremendous value in earning a credential from Penn GSE from our higher education area. So our graduates have gone on not only to be college presidents, but also to hold and make a difference in a host of other leadership roles at colleges and universities across the US and in some other nations. Again, my bias, I think the faculty are terrific. They work hard and collaboratively to provide an engaging curricular experience. And it's really designed to build skills and knowledge of the most important issues facing higher education administration. Our students are also incredible. They're diverse in background, perspective, institutional affiliation, position. It's been also incredible to see how students engage in the experience at the moment, but how they go on, the strength of the bonds that our students establish with each other is just really, it's amazing that they persist years after they've left the program. I could go on, but in short, I see tremendous value. So Karen, why is now the time for campus leaders to step up and lead?
I think this is a moment in time where we'll look back and say, wow, things used to be very different. On our college campuses, our demographics are shifting dramatically in some parts of the country. They're not only declining in some parts, they're increasing in other parts of the country. And the ethnic and the racial split is also changing. The dynamics of our campus, how our campuses look is really changing. That could necessitate some changes in the numbers of sports and the kinds of sports we offer. So it's an important time to look at your longer term view in light of the demographic shifts. The next thing that is really an issue, I know both of you know this very well, is the issue of student debt. And how many weeks and days of the week can we actually ask athletes to participate and not address the student debt that they may be accruing? Now, if they're successful at leveraging their name, image, and likeness, they might be able to make a few $1,000s or maybe even more. But that's an unknown at this point. So we have to realize that every family graduates with some kind of concern about their financial situation when they leave. And it's a really important time to try to be mindful of that in athletics. Since I started coaching 30 years ago, the cost of college education has gone up exponentially. And I think coaches sometimes lose that sense of how much it costs every day to be in class. I think our students and our families are mindful of that, and adding more weeks of practice, more days of practice is good for the coach, but is it the best for the students? Graduation, economic mobility, co-op and internships possibilities. I think we need to discuss those. And that's one of the reasons we bring this certificate program to you. So I don't see any questions coming in. So I really want to thank Dr. Laura Perna, I also want to thank Dr. Scott Flanagan. I want to thank Dr. Zachary Herman. Zachary has been kind enough to drop into the chat box the links for more information. And certainly feel free to reach out to me or to Zachary with any questions. We're so glad you could join us today.
Yes, and I wanted just to echo those thanks to Dr. Flanagan, Dr. Perna, Dr. Weaver. This is such an important, critical, timely topic. I know it's on so many people's minds, and if it's not, it will be soon because of all the dramatic and radical changes taking place. And to be at the forefront and to be in a leading stance on this is so critical. So thank you for this thoughtful conversation. And I am going to share my screen one last time here. Again, we are incredibly excited here at the Penn Graduate School of Education to really have a first of its kind certificate program geared to support senior level leaders. We have a link in the chat where you can learn more about it, but Penn GSC is really going to be the hub of leadership and innovation in this space, and we're really excited to support campus leaders across the country as they navigate these challenges. If you have, we'd love for your feedback, as always. So I'm going to put a feedback link in the chat as well. We have a link to the athletics certificate in the chat. And we also have other professional learning opportunities. So if you're interested in learning more, you can visit our website and you can sign up to subscribe for our newsletter. So thank you very much for joining us and have a wonderful weekend.